Hey everybody, Todd Vandermeid here for another edition of Freedom Steel. Yes, I know it's been a while, but we have some breaking news. But this quick update first. My wife Amy came home from the hospital and rehab about 6 weeks ago, and I am her full-time caregiver here at the house. So as we've been developing a routine, it has certainly taken up a fair amount of my time dealing with doctor's appointments, therapy, and all that kind of stuff. On another note, about 4 weeks ago today, I was elected the president of Aurora Sportsman's Club, the largest gun club in the state of Illinois. That has added to some of my time constraints. But with some breaking news today out of the Supreme Court, I wanted to get out an update with some different thoughts. And so, cue the alert. And so, today, this morning, with the announcement from Friday's conference, the Supreme Court of the United States has accepted and granted cert to the Vanderstok case challenging the ATF frame and receivers regulation. This regulation would make 80% style frames and parts kits, and treat them like they were a firearm and put them under the same onus of background checks, even though they are not. Now, this is not a straight up 2A case. This is a challenge under the Administrative Procedures Act as to whether or not ATF has the authority to do this. And this brings up a couple of questions with the granting of cert today. First off, they heard arguments in Cargil just 6 weeks ago, whatever it was. And so, with that, they already have a very big challenge to ATF and their use of the APA and how they keep flaunting the Gun Control Act of 1968 or the NFA, the National Firearms Act of 1934, and turning around and just rewriting stuff. And since they can't get squat through Congress, they've been trying to rewrite definitions, and by rewriting definitions, trying to pile on gun control. It is pretty much Biden's version of Obama's I have a pen and a phone. With all that, my first thing is, okay, you've got Cargill teed up here. Why not? Why grant cert now? And I may have an answer to that, I may not. But why grant cert now when it is highly likely that if Cargill comes down the way I think it's going to come down and say ATF is beyond their scope, you could then GVR the case and or just punt it and say, yeah, no, Cargill was right. It's kind of, I mean, why would you not hold it for a GVR? Or why would you simply not hold it and do a per curiam opinion where you just say, hey, based on Cargill, ATF, you're out of bounds? I don't know. This is raising some flags with me that I'm not completely sure what the court is doing, except that the other option is, what does this say about what they're going to do with the two challenges to the Chevron doctrine? The one was that fisheries case about fishermen off the East Coast that was a straight up challenge to Chevron. Where at the orals, I think the chief judge said, haven't we really just written off Chevron because, we're just not applying it? So, what does this say about what the court is going to do with Chevron? I don't know. But these are two very big questions that I have. Now, Vanderstok was one of three cases that were initially kicked off: Cargill bump stocks, Vanderstok on frames and receivers, and you've got Mock v. Garland, which is the pistol brace rule. Now, we're probably going to have a fourth case on the APA stuff with their new definitions of engaged in the business and all that. So, But Cargil and Vanderstok are not Second Amendment challenges. They will affect Second Amendment rights by how they restrain ATF and their ability to make rules, to enact gun control, and infringe upon our rights under the Constitution without going through Congress. But these challenges are not being brought as Second Amendment claims. But I think we have a very big opportunity. So in the Cargil case, we took that opportunity to sit there and say, you have to rule narrowly on the language within the National Firearms Act about machine guns, because if you don't, you sit there and you make AR-15s one regulation away from being considered readily convertible, and therefore they can be banned via an administrative rule as being readily convertible and thus machine guns, which is essentially what the Seventh Circuit is saying. But that's a different video about that. So I also think that if you'll remember in this case in Vanderstok, there were a couple of times that we had won injunctions. Garland and the ATF appealed it up, and the injunctions were stayed by the Supreme Court. But now, if we roll back to last week's ruling in the Idaho case, where they set down some premises and redefining of how they're going to deal with the shadow docket, maybe what they were doing in the Vanderstok case makes a little more sense when viewed through that lens, that they want to get a handle on some of these liberal judges who have been issuing national injunctions on all kinds of things. Remember, a lot of that happened under President Trump. But now it seems when we get our chance to get injunctions, they're getting canned at the court. Maybe because we now have a 6-3 split on the court, that you had the majority opinion, I believe, written by Gorsuch in Idaho. You have Barrett and Kavanaugh doing their own concurring opinions about that. So I think there is some change within the court afoot and some procedure stuff that's going on. However, we have an opportunity, just like the FFL, SADEC, Second Amendment Law Center filed the amici brief in the Cargil case. I think we have a huge bunch of ground to take with the Vanderstok case. Absent the challenge under the APA, I think we have an opportunity here to turn this into a 2A case. And our goal should be to get certain tenets etched within either the holdings or the dicta of the court to reinforce certain things. And this will go back to the FFL lawsuit that was filed in Southern Illinois as part of the challenge to the Illinois gun ban, where they didn't tackle magazines, they took on the gun ban and the parts. So the premise, I got a tickle in my throat, drinking some Jack and Diet tonight with my gun barrel coffee mug here. Thanks, guys. And so in the FFL lawsuit, they took on the right to repair. So here's how it works. Let's jump back to a Zell. And the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, which has never been overturned to Zell 1 or Zell 2, thank you, Rhonda, is that you have the right to maintain proficiency with a firearm. They said, and they also talked about ancillary rights to the Second Amendment. So as I have said repeatedly, our job under the text, tradition, and history model of the test of the Second Amendment is to sit there and make the Second Amendment's 27 words read like the Encyclopedia Britannica. Okay? 27 words, Encyclopedia Britannica. We're going to cover this much. So, with that, the right to repair. If we have the right to maintain proficiency in a firearm per the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, then don't we have the right to maintain firearms in good working order in order to maintain that proficiency? I argue the right to repair is one of those ancillary rights that are codified and enveloped within the 27 words of the Second Amendment. That being said, in order to repair a firearm, I have to be able to obtain parts, whether it be a firing pin, spring, trigger, whatever. I have to be able to obtain parts, or the gunsmith has to be able to obtain parts in order to effectuate a repair. Now, if I have the right to repair my firearm, then the next thing that flows from that is the ability to build a firearm. Can I acquire all the parts necessary to build a firearm? Okay, so I acquire a receiver, I require a barrel, I acquire a trigger and springs and the screws and everything out there. And I do all that, and I acquire the parts, and I have the skills and ability, or with YouTube videos or help from friends, I can build a firearm. Yay. And if we have the right to build a firearm, then doesn't it naturally flow from that we have the right to manufacture our own firearm? And if we have the right to manufacture our own, now we're not talking about in a commercial setting. We're not talking about, for commercial production and resale in a retail market. We are talking about us in the basement, in the garage, at the workbench, and we have the skill, ability, and tools to manufacture a firearm for our own personal use. And if we go down that road and we look at text, it's the right to acquire arms, because in SALC and in the Illinois Firearm Retailers Association v. Chicago, the courts have found there is a right to acquire. You have to have the right to acquire. And you can only acquire a firearm, either you buy it in a transaction, either privately or commercially, you trade for it, or you manufacture that firearm. Only ways to acquire a firearm. And so under the text, this is part of the keep and or bear, because I am acquiring a firearm for any lawful purpose, including self-defense, target shooting, hunting, whatever. Any lawful purpose. So under the text, yes, it's there. Now tradition and history. So if we go to, say, take the original Springfield Armory. The original Springfield Armory, run by the United States government, really didn't get into making muskets until almost 1791, if my memory serves me correct. They were largely making cannons, hence the cross cannons logo. They were making artillery pieces. And it wasn't until about the signing or the ratification of the Bill of Rights with the Constitution that they started getting into the production of small arms or muskets. And at the time, the Revolutionary War, you relied on people who brought their own individual firearms largely, and those were either acquired from a local gunsmith, made by a local gunsmith, or of the few arms dealers that there were, they were imported from overseas. That's how the guns came here. You had a lot of small-time manufacturers. And with those small-time manufacturers, being blacksmiths or some of the early pioneers in firearms development, there's a rich history going back to the founding of manufacturing. How do you think the Kentucky long rifle came to be? It came to be because somebody was experimenting and trying to make a more accurate rifle instead of the smoothbores that were out there at the time, the blunderbusses, the Brown Besses. They were trying to make. Beretta is one of the oldest firearms companies in the entire world. They've been manufacturing guns since about the 1500s, or maybe even a little earlier. So what we want to do is we need to hammer away at amici briefs that start exploring that what ATF is doing under the APA is a violation of the Second Amendment, in so much that it is preventing us from acquiring and interfering with our right to repair firearms. And from our right to repair flows the right to build, and from the right to build flows the right to manufacture, which is richly throughout the American history, especially during the time of the Revolutionary War. And then not long after, leading up into the Civil War, the advancements in firearms that were made by a lot of innovators and things like that. And it's rich within the history, especially around the ratification of the Bill of Rights. And that is what we need to do at Vanderstok. We need to turn Vanderstok from a set of shackles and leg irons on the ATF into a full-throated, full throttle to a ruling that guarantees us the right to repair. Remember, this also came out of Mock v. Garland down in Texas, where the district court judge says people have been modifying their firearms forever. People are always making tweaks and changes to their guns. So I try to keep these around 15 minutes. We're starting to run just a hair long, but everybody who has been saying kind words and sending notes about my wife and her progression, thank you very much. She is getting better slowly. It is going to be a long climb. And so now that I think I'm getting back into a routine, we've got a bunch of content. And today, I got just a stack of stuff piled up. And today, with this news about Vanderstok and some calls with the attorneys or whatever, I just wanted to crank this out and get back into the saddle again. So thank you for all your patience. I would also like to point out that if you want to help support good work in the concept of right to repair, you have the Second Amendment Defense and Education Coalition, of which I'm on the board of directors. And I think that if you want to see things like the amici brief that was filed in the Cargil case, if you want to see this kind of forward thinking continue on in the 2A litigation world, please donate. Every dollar, every $5, every $20 helps. And the legal bills are ticking on the stuff in Southern Illinois as we're heading to a full-blown trial and all that. And so if you want to see more out of us and see us take bigger and broader steps in the 2A litigation world, please, I'll put a link for you to donate down below. But as always, thanks again for your support, your prayers, your thoughts, and as always, frag out.